Thank you very much. My name is Wesley Hughes. For those of you who don't know, Financial Secretary. I'm very, very happy to be here this morning to speak generally about institutions and their capacity and outcomes. I was fascinated, Peter. I didn't know your paper was the genesis of the conference, but I have read the paper and I've reflected deeply on the issue over the years, Jamaica, Barbados. And I've come to the conclusion that, like many commentators, that Jamaica is a far more complex and nuanced place than we sometimes really imagine. There are lots of work that would have been done which would compare Jamaica and Barbados. But I've come down to one simple, maybe simplistic notion, and that's the notion of accepting your reality, your social reality. Jamaica has never done that. We have never accepted the inequalities and the differences in a settled way. And I think Barbados, for good or ill, seem to have accepted the social differences, the racial differences, and have gone on to produce. And supposedly we'll come back to solving those problems later. Jamaica has been in a process of trying to resolve those issues over the years and has sacrificed stability and social peace as it seeks to deal with those issues. At independence, and I was alive then, we, like most developing countries, were given a seat in the UN, a constitution, a flag, an airline a little bit later, McDonald's and KFC. Those were symbols of progress and initial conditions to go forward. What was missing over the years was good policy, consistent good policy. Because of the nuance and complex nature of the society, there was constant change and uncertainty about the policy shifts. There was not a continuity over an extended period of time in terms of the major policies. And therefore, there was instability that was transmitted. Investments were not consistent in building infrastructure and education. And these things mixed in with some misfortune in terms of natural disasters. And if you look at Jamaica's topography and geography, it's important. 2 days of extensive rain gives you flood because of the topography. And so agriculture was never the most productive, although almost 80% of the population was employed in some way in agriculture around the time of independence, connected in some way. 2 weeks without rain give you drought conditions. So we were always a society that moved from extremes over a very, very short period of time. So it's a very volatile society, both in terms of its productive base, its culture, its history, etc. And so we have never been a settled society. We have not had a prolonged period of stability and calm. And therefore, the outcome that we have seen is a direct result of some of these factors. We have looked at Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti in 2008. Two colleagues of mine, Dr. Clark and Sophia White-Gibbons, did a paper on the capacity of small states to cope in the context of globalization. And two things drove us to do that paper. One, we were developing a long-term plan for Jamaica. And when we looked at the range of expectations of the state, we came to the conclusion that given the capacity of the state, and Susan, you have measured government effectiveness here. I don't think we have changed significantly. In fact, we might have slipped a little bit below this index here. We were convinced that the capacity of the state to deliver effectively on all the expectations in the plan just didn't exist. So we needed to address that issue. And secondly, the fact is that after 9/11 and the global emphasis on anti-terrorism, much of our time, or policy time, or legislative time, was taken up with dealing with global issues. If you looked at cabinet submissions and cabinet retreat and parliamentary time, a lot of it had to do with dealing with issues about security, global security issues that were not specific to Jamaica, but because we are part of this global network, we had to conform. And one of the scarcest resources that a developing country has is good policy time by the leadership of the country. And if you're spending so much of your time dealing with these global international issues, which are important, but not critical from a national development perspective at the time, then you're going to be diverting a lot of attention away from some of the other critical issues. And so we did this paper, and it was clear to us that if you look carefully, we didn't have the capacity to do everything and have good outcomes. And therefore, we had to concentrate or focus our attention on some critical issues, identify the strategic issues, and deal with them. And I'll end by just using one example. Next week, we would have concluded the Jamaica Debt Exchange. Some of you might have heard of it. It's a bold initiative, in my view, courageous, to exchange out almost the entire domestic debt portfolio to give longer paper at lower interest rates at longer maturities. Now, this, in my judgment, carried tremendous risk because so much of the financial institutions are invested in Jamaica paper. And it could threaten the entire financial system of the country if not handled right. And I saw three things that happened. One, there was political commitment and passionate drive by the political directorate that we had to do something about the debt. Jamaica's debt is about 130% of GDP, which is not sustainable. But we didn't have the capacity to do it all by ourselves. So we had to bring in expertise from overseas, Citibank and multilateral institutions, working with committed Jamaican institutions, working very closely and executing almost perfectly. So we changed out our debt, 100% of it almost. And we had 99.2% participation, 99.2% participation. This is not an election that was held in Eastern Europe during the communist era. This is, in fact, true participation. And the conclusion I draw from that, and this is where I'll conclude, if you focus the attention, you get institutions which are, in most instances, they have some strengths, some capabilities. The political leadership and the commitment with the real expertise, you can pull it off. But you can't do a debt exchange and 200 other things simultaneously. You have to focus. Thank you very much.